Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show here on television. We get the right guests, ask the relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We're live and interactive tonight discussing a very tragic story that happened at the Konongo Odumase Senior High School. It was bullying gone wrong, resulting in the stabbing of a student. Tonight we're discussing not just that incident, but how to stop bullying in our secondary schools and what can be done to deal with that. I have a very, very exciting panel I'll be introducing shortly. Stay with us.
Creamy Plus is a fully skimmed evaporated milk. Creamy Plus is available in a shop near you.
This message has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
Welcome back. So the point of view tonight takes a closer look at the issue of bullying. Why are we looking at bullying? Well, 5 students of Konongo Odumase Senior High School have been remanded by a court for the stabbing of a 15-year-old student who tried to stop them from bullying another colleague. It was a tragic story that occurred. Our reporter, Fatih Aminu Ibrahim, went to the school to file this report when the incident occurred.
According to an eyewitness who spoke to City News on condition of anonymity, the incident happened during prep time when some Form 2 students, including Frimpong Emmanuel, allegedly started molesting Form 1 students. This continued for some time until some of the Form 1 students attempted to stop him from abusing them. This act by the group of Form 1 students allegedly irritated 17-year-old Frimpong Emmanuel, who used a kitchen knife to stab one of the boys, Lerhan Samun, leading to his death. Shortly after the incident, the school authorities reported the incident to the Konongo District Police Command for investigations to commence. The police say so far, 5 persons, including the main suspect, 17-year-old Frimpong Emmanuel, have been arrested and detained to assist them with investigations. DSP Osei Edu Ajimai is the district police commander for Konongo.
Suspect Emmanuel Osei Frimpong rushed on one of the first-year students and attempted to slap him. Now the deceased, who was close to that first-year student, stopped suspect Osei Frimpong. Now this action infuriated suspect Emmanuel Osei Frimpong, and he pulled out a small kitchen knife which he has concealed on him and stabbed the deceased at the lower left ribs. The deceased started bleeding profusely, and he was rushed to the Konongo Odumase Government Hospital, where he was pronounced dead by the hospital authorities. Police have been able to arrest all the 5 suspects. We have also retrieved the blood-stained small kitchen knife.
Family of 15-year-old Lerhan Samun say they are devastated by the incident. According to them, the deceased has always had a calm demeanor, and so the incident has really hit them hard. They are thus calling on relevant authorities to ensure that all persons involved in the matter are dealt with in accordance with the law. Alhaj Abubakar Siddiq is an uncle of the deceased and the spokesperson for the family.
Headmaster in the police station, any regional commander Naishia, Nkoma will say deny any. I will say, autopsy and sana yanya ifurunasi, so yes, you are to see showing pathology no, my medicine, because Cramofood and Cafe say, you say just to say, not more than 4 hours. But unfortunately, she said, I am so you just to say, a woman marina, pathology, a woman made surgeon, and Sunny Yakusi. Ghana, a woman. Mra edidi a woman one this abon say no the edidi no one dey say ne justice ni ni korena ni wo yes am the was say ye na won so say the wa anyi ni.
Meanwhile, the headmaster of the school, Dr. Benjamin Kwekuma, says the school will collaborate with the police to ensure justice is served in the matter.
We have reported the incident to our bosses. The police is investigating the case. The student that stabbed the other student has been arrested. And I want to assure the public that we shall give our maximum support until investigations are concluded so that we have justice for all.
So that was Fatih Aminu Ibrahim's report. So tonight we're trying to understand what happened and also the relationship between what happened and bullying generally, and whether this is the clarion call for a more tougher stance from school authorities and government on the issue of bullying. I have in studio Kofi Asari, he's the Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch. Kofi, good evening, welcome.
Hi Bernard, good evening.
Thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
We'll also be joined from our Kumasi studios, the Ashanti Regional SRC Coordinator, Raphael Sarkodie. Raphael, if you can hear me, good evening.
Good evening, Bernard.
All right, so that's Raphael joining us from Kumasi. We would also be joined on a digital platform by the PRO of the Ministry for Education, Kwesi Kwating. Mr. Kwating, good evening.
Very good evening to you. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining us. And later on, the Asante Achim Central Education Director, Patricia Sapong, will also join us. So let me just take initial reactions to the Konongo Odumase story before we get into the concept. Kofi, what did you make of this story when it unfolded?
It was an unfortunate one. No one would wish to hear such news from our schools. Children go to school to learn, and they go not just to learn literacy and numeracy and problem-solving skills and critical thinking, but also to learn good morals, to learn good etiquettes, and to learn how to integrate into society, to learn brotherliness, good neighborliness, and all that. And these are some of the principles underlying our boardinized secondary education system, because we believe that it's important for us to have a cultural mix. So we learn how to live together with each other by mixing with people from various backgrounds, religious, cultural, socioeconomic, geographical, gender, and all that. So if one sends their school to their son or their child to school to benefit from all these, cocktail of benefits supposed to accrue to a boarding student, only to hear that the award has been killed, through an act of bullying, it's actually very devastating and news to hear. No one would wish to hear such news. But it didn't happen in a vacuum, because prior to this, we have been hearing, several instances, several cases of unrest in schools, misbehavior, indiscipline in schools, truancy, teachers complaining that students no more respect them because of laxity in enforcing disciplinary rules and all that. So it didn't happen in a vacuum. I remember that just 2 weeks before, or 3 weeks before the incident, a couple of guys felt that their teachers were strict on them in invigilating a paper, and then they bent down a whole boys' dormitory in Yenahini. That could have caused the death of someone, right? Prior to that, we had another destruction of a teacher's farm. So, such violent acts have been taking place in our schools. Months prior to this, some students actually killed the teacher. And the teacher said that they were not even going to invigilate during the WASI. So it just didn't happen, but it looked as if there is a fast creeping culture of violent behavior, not just in discipline, but violent behavior.
Fast creeping culture of violent behavior in SHS.
Into our boarding schools.
I see.
Which we must discuss.
We'll come back to that. Let me go to Kumasi. Raphael, you are the Ashanti Regional SRC Coordinator. What did you make of this incident?
Well, Bernard, thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. Very unfortunate because it happened just a few days after we've had an engagement exercise with all stakeholders in education, parents, the police unit, CHAS, teacher unions, and all schools in Ashanti region met and had a serious engagement about the culture of impunity and how we can do away with that in our various schools. And so when the incident
Raphael,
happened...
I'm not sure we can hear you, so if you can hold on, I'll come back to you. I can see you're talking, I can't hear you, please forgive me. Let me come to Kwesi Kwarteng. I'll come back to Raphael, he's joining us from our Kumasi studio. So, Mr. PRO, as an institution at the ministry, what did you make of this incident?
Bernard, good evening to you once again, and to the other panelists, especially my good brother Kofi and all your viewers. For us in the ministry, it was a very troubling news. And then especially, I think for me, it was very sad, especially being an old student of the Konongo Odumase Senior High School. When I heard the news, it was something that, of course, generally is unacceptable. And you wouldn't expect that when in our formal system of education, when you send your child or your ward to school, at the end of the day, when you go to the school, probably you will be left with such a shock news. It was quite devastating and something that we couldn't fathom that it happened even in the first place. But having said that, let me also take the opportunity to once again express our sincerest condolences to the bereaved family. After the incident, they traveled all the way from BAG in their Hafo region to only come and at least see the lifeless body of their work, and that is very worrying. And it is something that we promise and hope that this should never happen again. At no point should we have such an incident in our various. If you recall, just last week, I think we was within the same week, Konongo Odumase Senior High School was in the news for having crossed a certain threshold in the National Science and Maths quiz. And of course, the natural expectation was that everybody was going to at least, praise them, as it has been synonymous with the whole National Science and Maths quiz competition. And then, very unfortunately, the news drifted, and we may have to bear with this conversation. I have personally gotten in touch with some teachers there, including the headmaster himself, Dr. Benjamin Kemba, the likes of the assistant headmaster, Mr. David and Pope. And if you look at GES, for instance, the Deputy Director General himself went there to assess the situation and also have a first-hand information. And everything that we are having points to the fact that as a country we need to sit up. For me, it even goes beyond the scope of the school setting. Of course, the conversation will be narrowed down to the school setting, but is a conversation about the kind of people that, or the kind of moral upbringing that we are giving it to our people and our children. How on earth will the young person pull a knife in the first place? Where did he even have the knife with him in the first place? And what was the purpose of such a knife? And these are questions that probably I'm sure security and investigators will come out with answers. But it's just mind-boggling that our moral fabric as a society can deteriorate to that extent, to the extent that you have a 17-year-old boy, the report and the narrative and accounts that we've had, taking a knife to stab his friend. It's very worrying. And if you listen to the Minister of Education, Dr. Yawosedu, recently, when he also spoke at the academic City University College, for instance, he also condemned the attempt and also reiterated that never again should this happen. So
beyond issuing condemnations, is the ministry minded to institute any inquiry? Because you've mentioned that, for example, you are surprised that there was a knife in the school. Have you written to the school to get clarity on what went wrong before this happened?
Yes, Bernard, like I said, I mean, as soon as the incident happened, Bernard, are you able to hear me? I'm getting some echoes.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, very well. So, like I said, as soon as the incident happened, of course, the leadership of the Ghana Education Service quickly got in touch with the institution to have a first-hand information of everything that has happened. There was a formal report that was even also brought to the TES Secretariat. And then the minister, for instance, has also been, Minister of Education, Dr. Osedoju, has also been briefed. And at the end of the day, for us, matters like this certainly is a criminal matter. And criminal matters, certainly you have state institutions that are responsible for handling criminal matters. At the end of the day, they will do their investigations, and I'm sure at some point the court may come in and make their own determination. I mean, at such a point, of course, if there are any further actions that as a ministry or as an agency we can take, fine. I mean, the Minister of Education has made it clear that justice is going to be served. But then beyond that level of collaboration has been at least we've seen that level of collaboration from the start. Because, I mean, instances like this, nobody really even predicted that this would happen. But at the end of the day, we are having such this unfortunate incident that we have to deal with. I mean, so when the incident happened, we have been collaborating with the state institutions as of now. And not only the state institutions, but also even the family of the young guy that unfortunately lost his life. And we will continue to deliver such level of collaboration to ensure that justice is there.
All right. Thank you. Let me come to Raphael, Ashanti Regional SHS Coordinator. Raphael, thanks for joining us. I was taking your initial reactions, but I couldn't hear you. Let's hope you can hear me now. What are your initial reactions to what happened in Konongo Odumase?
Well, Bernard, very unfortunate. Against the backdrop that we held a very comprehensive stakeholder engagement exercise for all schools in Ashanti region. We met with stakeholders and we met with all student leaders from the various schools to drum home the need to conduct themselves and to desist from a culture of impunity and stick to school rules and regulations. And that was as a result of what we experienced during the final exams or during the WASI. We saw it as a need to meet stakeholders together with student leaders and engage them on this. Again, I personally have been to Konongo during the day, during the time when they were writing the final exams, and we are engaged the students. So we felt that a lot of work has been done, and that students will behave and conduct themselves based on stipulated rules and regulations. And so this happening, very unfortunate. And then we also know that if you are talking of heads of institutions with astute leadership skills, Konongo Odumase, Dr. Ba is a typical example. And you look at the history and the record of the school, and for me, I believe that this is very unfortunate. But it also gives us an indication that we all must strengthen orientation and sensitization and education and get it across to every student in every nook and cranny of the school so that they know that the fact that you are wearing the uniform doesn't take the responsibility away from you obeying school rules and regulations.
Raphael, how serious is bullying in our secondary schools? You are the SLC coordinator, so I'm sure you are well informed about what happens in our schools. How serious is the issue of bullying?
Well, Bernard, we won't shy away from the fact that bullying exists in the schools. Unfortunately, a lot of the cases are not reported to school authorities and all that. What I have done is that I give my number and my contacts to all students so that when they have issues and they are not confident enough to approach school authorities to report, they can contact me and I take it up with the directorate, district or regional directorate, and we get to the schools to address those concerns, because we know a lot of students may not necessarily have that boldness and that audacity to walk to authorities and report a senior who may be mishandling them. But having said that, it's an age-old challenge that at times we feel that it is part of us, and so we live with it. When you are in Form 1, you accept it, and then when you get to Form 3, you also met it out to other students who are in Form 1. But we believe a time has come that we must stop it at a certain point in time. We believe that perhaps this gives us the leverage to do that.
All right, we'll come back to you. Thank you. This is the point of view. We're talking about the Konongo Odumase stabbing incident. My guest, Kofi Asari, says there's a creeping culture, I don't know whether it's of lawlessness in our senior high schools, We're also talking to Raphael Sako, the Asante Regional SHS Coordinator. He admits that there is some bullying in schools. Kwesi Kwarteng is the PR of Education. We'll talk about that with him as well. We'll later on be joined by the Asante Achim Central Education Director. What are your own thoughts? And do you have any experiences, particularly for your wards, of bullying? We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Tonight we're looking at the incident that happened at Konongo Odumase Senior High School and discussing the concept of bullying in our SHSs. This led to the death of Lahan Samun. He was trying to prevent bullying involving 5 Form 2 boys and a Form 1 boy. One of them stabbed him with a kitchen knife in the lower rib. He was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. My guest in studio, Kofi Asare of Africa Education Watch. I also have the GSPRO, Kwesi Kwarteng, and Raphael Sako, who is the Regional SRC Coordinator for Ashanti Region. So, Kofi, you said that there appears to be a creeping culture of, is it lawlessness or violence? What are you really saying in our secondary schools? In discipline.
Yeah.
And is this new?
Indiscipline has been with us for some time now. But if you speak with headmasters in senior high schools, you get a sense that since the introduction of the positive discipline policy, which virtually bans the use of corporal punishments as a first resort and promotes the use of other behavioral change, positive disciplinary, methods. A lot of teachers and headmasters have actually developed some inertia, when it comes to enforcing existing rules. If you look at the situation we are discussing, we have adequate rules, adequate control mechanisms on paper in schools to ensure that they don't happen. Our rules and regulations and laws frown on all forms of violent behavior, including bullying. But bullying is taking place, or is able to take place and get to the magnitude we are discussing because the control mechanisms are not working properly. Number one, there is little motivation on the part of teachers to instill discipline on campus because of the inertia they have developed towards the positive disciplinary policy, which prevents them from caning students at first resort. And apart from that too, it looks as if the policy wasn't accepted well. The level of acceptance for that policy was very low. The people in custody of the kids are the teachers. So if they do not accept the policy, they will just fold their hands, teach, and then watch the kids do what they want to do. After all, it's no one's KPI to ensure that children sleep by 10. Because if they don't sleep, you can't do anything to them. If you talk to head teachers, this is the sense you get. Apart from that, you realize that in most of our boarding schools, majority of our boarding schools, especially the underserved ones, and don't forget that close to 65 to 70% of our boarding schools, of our senior high schools, are boarding schools. The percentage of teachers living on campus is so low. You go to an underserved senior high school, and then you find that about 3, 4, 5 teachers are the only ones who have accommodation on campus. When that happens, it makes it very difficult for such small numbers of teachers to control an average of 3,000 per school. It becomes very, very difficult. I remember the last time when we were monitoring the free senior high school, I was in a school in Kojokrom, in Kojokrom area. And they raised the issue that most of the Shama Senior High School, Shama Senior High School, most of the teachers live in town. So they had a challenge of controlling students, the boarding students. So if you have a school where majority of the teachers are outside and very few are on campus, definitely you have a challenge controlling an average of 3,000 students in a senior high school. And when the numbers are low, then the rules that are supposed to be the control mechanisms to prevent violent behavior and bullying and other forms of indiscipline suffer enforcement because there are few numbers, and for that matter, few teachers available to be supervising students in the evening. So a mixture of the limited accommodation in secondary schools, limiting the number of teachers to be available on campus, go to dormitories and enforce existing rules to make the schools much safer. And then also the inertia teachers have developed as a result of the new positive disciplinary toolkit is accounting to an
This
extent.
positive disciplinary toolkit, what is it? Is it that they cannot physically cane students, or only the head teacher can do it?
Only the teacher. Only the teacher can sanction that act. And there are protocols that the head teacher needs to follow. So it is an exception and not a norm. Okay. And so for the kids, it's a holiday, because you hardly get to the level where the head teacher will sanction that the students should be lashed or should be caned.
But some will say we had bullying in secondary schools for many years. So this positive disciplinary thing could not be the reason why we are seeing what we're seeing.
No, the point I'm making is that there are control mechanisms to ensure that the bullying we've had in many years remain under check, remain under control. And one of those control mechanisms where we were in school was that if you misbehaved, you will be perhaps, I'm not advocating caning, but then you will be caned in public during assembly, or you will be given a punishment that names and shames you and also gives you some physical pain. Okay, now we have been trained in that tradition that we are normally afraid of the rod. Suddenly there's a new policy which is right-based, which is more reformative. Okay, but the policy's acceptance has not been sudden, and the change management process has not been smooth, because the key operators in that policy chain are teachers,
and they don't seem to have accepted this policy.
Exactly. So
if anything at all, they are indifferent to it.
If they don't accept it and they see it as a means of you reducing their power and influence in the school, they will fold their arms, and then watch certain things happen until they degenerate into what we are.
So, Mr. Kwati, do you agree with this? There are two issues here: that your positive punishment thing, your positive disciplinary thing, has not been well accepted by the school teachers, and this seems to be worsening the problem. And then also, a lot of the schools, but a lot of the deprived schools don't seem to have teachers living on campus. So in the evenings in particular, it's a free-for-all for the students. What's your comment as Ministry of Education?
Okay, I think, Bernard, so may you kindly repeat the question again? I wasn't getting it.
So Kofi Asare is saying that the positive disciplinary policy has not been accepted fully by the teachers, and therefore a lot of them are indifferent to disciplining students because they feel their power has been taken. Number two.
Okay.
Yeah, and then number two, some of the schools don't have enough teachers on campus. So in the evenings, the level of supervision is low, and the students feel they have power to do anything they want.
Okay. All right, so I get it now. Thank you, Bernard. So with regards to the first question about whether or not the new guidelines or rules when it comes to how to enforce discipline, that is the tools for positive discipline in schools, whether or not they have been embraced by the teachers. I admit that even though some level of consultations were made somewhere in 2016, of course, I mean, where UNICEF was one of the key stakeholders, you had the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Education Service, some teacher unions, and even some selected teachers that were formed part of the stakeholders when it comes to the pre-consensus stage of this toolkit. Of course, all those arrangements were done. But for me, I think as a spokesperson for the ministry, I think we have to, at some point, we have to make some level of admission and concession that engagement, if you look at the happenings today, and then the posture of some teachers and even the postures of some students clearly shows that we could have done more with regards to that level of engagement. Because currently, if we speak to the teachers, the impression is that the toolkit, that of course was geared towards reformation and not necessarily retribution. Now, the understanding and the perception the teachers have is that the Ministry of Education or GS have taken that level of authority from them. Again, the misconception students are also having is that, GS is saying that you shouldn't cane us, and that means that we have a lot of power this time around to be able to challenge our teachers. You see, it is quite unfortunate when probably discipline is reduced to punishment. You see, the whole concept about discipline is not necessarily to inflict pain or physical pain on the individual. But of course, I mean, at the end of the day, the utmost aim that anybody wants to achieve with any discipline action or discipline measure is to get the best of behaviors out of a person or out of a person, of course, whatever conduct that a person does. But unfortunately, the interpretation that all of us has placed on discipline is, hey, punishment. Yes, I understand, because it looks quite easier, especially when you look at the numbers. And I will delve into the numbers, but I mean, if you look at the numbers, the teacher handling a class of, say, 30, say, 40, say, 50, say, 60, it's quite easier for the person or for such a teacher to use, say, a cane to punish students than probably to say, well, right, I will not repeat this act or conduct again for a full book, or probably say, well, read. I mean, so the question is, even if the student fails to read, what happens next? These are all fundamental questions that we may have to ask ourselves. So for me, I made that admission that some way, somehow, that engagement between the ministry or the Ghana Education Service and the teachers, we could have done better, because at the end of the day, the teachers have a different perception and the students also have a different perception. Because the bottom line is that if we talk about discipline in the school, it's a shared responsibility. Teachers will have their role, parents will have their role.
So you are admitting that policy could have been better managed. What about the issue of numbers? What about the numbers? The fact that in deprived schools, you have just few teachers. Bernard, I want you to deal with that quickly for me.
Yeah, sure. Bernard, I'm making that admission on the backdrop of the reality that we are confronted with now, especially having spoken to some teachers and some students. Now, on the issue about population, that is where I really beg to differ. For me, this whole issue about discipline in our school is not that simplistic. I mean, if you want to look at the teacher-to-student ratio, I mean, vis-a-vis those who stays on campus and those who do not stay, within the past 4 years, over 93,000 teachers have been recruited, which means that averagely you are having a rate about 23,000 teachers. Even if you go to the colleges of education alone, the colleges of education averagely gives you about 16,000 teachers every year. So government or the GES will have to probably go beyond even what the colleges of education are producing, and then go to the colleges of universities that are offering educational programs to go and do top-up, so before they are able to even get teachers to recruit. So, I mean, it cannot be said, and it cannot be entirely probably accurate, that maybe the suggestion is that some way, somehow, we do not have the teachers to meet the numbers.
His point is His point is that the teachers don't have a place on campus. So accommodation.
What data supports that? Well, I mean, of course, I mean, we admit that there is that larger problem. I mean, the general problem of accommodation, the general problem of infrastructure, even with students, that government is trying to address. I mean, when GET funded their last infrastructure audit, for instance, about 3,897 projects were ongoing. You may call it abandoned projects. Government, as at now, has been able to do 1,001 of them. So, of course, with still a deficit of 2,826 of them. So, yes, that admission, it is there. But I'm not sure it is that simplistic, that some way, somehow, is because teachers are not living on campus. So, if you want to sustain that argument, then you also have to balance it with the fact that even now the double track system is running. So at every point in time, we do not have that huge number of students in our schools. So what also happens to that argument? For me, it's a broader conversation. It goes beyond, say, the teacher-to-student ratio. Even generally, Bernard, like I said, if you want to widen the scope of the conversation, let's look at beyond the school setting. Let's look at even compliance rates and our general performance when it comes to compliance with our ordinary laws like road safety, road traffic laws, like sanitation laws. We are really having a problem in this country, and I admit and I agree with Kofi, that has really crept into our schools and it's causing problem for all of us. So for me, it's a broader conversation about how do we tackle this problem once and for all. Of course, GES will come out with their rules, but at the end, the rules will have to be assimilated and understood by both the teachers and the students as well.
Robert, thank you. Raphael, do you admit that the idea of positive discipline has made the students more defiant because they know that caning is not the first resort? Some of them are defying the teachers and misbehaving.
I agree to the idea that misunderstanding or misrepresentation of the positive disciplinary tool to the students and teachers, it's a problem. The intent of the disciplinary tool is to ensure that discipline corrects or reforms and not necessarily cause physical harm to a student. And for me, the principle behind it is great. Having said that, it is not a license for students to misbehave and to say that now you cannot cane us or you cannot inflict physical harm to us, and so we take it as a license to misbehave. And that is also not to be misunderstood by teachers to mean that you have taken away from us our authority and therefore we will sit on the fence and watch. I believe that a lot more education and sensitization would have to be done for people to understand the rationale behind the positive disciplinary tools, that is reform. I mean, if you cause physical harm to a student, and you may not necessarily have changed the person in any way. And so for me, the intent is great. It has been misunderstood by the students, and perhaps teachers are also not seeing it in that perspective and be thinking that they have taken away or withdrawn from us the authority to punish. I believe that the focus of every teacher is to see the student do well, end well, and be able to exit and find himself in a very good career. Again, students ought to be told and conscientized that you do not take advantage of this, but you must see it as an opportunity to conduct yourself very well within the framework of the code of conduct.
Thank you. I'll come back and ask you what you've been telling the students as you visit them, because I know you've been doing some school rounds. I'll take another short break. We're talking about bullying in our schools. We're talking about the creeping, almost, I won't call it lawlessness. That may be a strong word. But clearly issues of discipline have come to the fore. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight we're trying to understand the seriousness of the Konongo Odumase case. So far, 5 students have been remanded, and essentially over the death of Lahan Samun, a Form 1 student who was stabbed after trying to separate a student who was attempting to bully another Form 1 student. My guest, Kofi Asare of Africa Education Watch. We also have Kwesi Kwarteng of the Ministry and Raphael Sarkodie of the SRC for Ashanti region. So what's the biggest thing we should do now, using the Konongo case, to limit this bullying issue? Can this be the entry point into some new reforms?
Well, there are 4 things we have in mind. The first thing is that we as an organization had set out to start reviewing the positive discipline policy this year. That activity is going to be done in the first quarter of next year. The policy has been running for about 4 years. And 4 years is not too early a time to review the policy, to find out how it is working, see if there are any gaps, how we can strengthen it to make it more effective. Gauge the level of effectiveness at this point after 4 years, whether it has impacted positively or negatively on discipline in our schools. It's a new policy. We see whether it situates within our culture and whether it has been accepted. And we see how we can engage government, the GS especially, on how to strengthen it and make it more effective. Apart from that, we need to have a focus on strengthening our PTA system. Our PTA systems used to be one of the control mechanisms in schools that instill discipline. Because if you're a student and you know that there's going to be one PTA meeting in a term, you know that your dad or your parents are likely to be in school once in a term. If you misbehave, your report card will be available to them. And PTA meetings provided that triangular dialogue between a teacher, parent, and teachers. Because of the ban on PTA dues, because of free senior high school, lots of headmasters have developed inertia in mobilizing PTAs. Okay, but PTAs are not only necessary for infrastructure development or financial contributions, but also in the moral, development of the children. And so we need to have the PTA issue becoming prioritized. Perhaps the GS can make it one of the KPIs of teachers, in addition to the passing maths and passing English. Thirdly, we need to strengthen peer support groups in our schools. Whatever you are seeing here is actually the outcome of undercurrents, that it's just an amalgam of undercurrents. It starts from somewhere and gets to the point we are discussing. So if we have peer-to-peer support groups systems working in the schools, if someone begins to harass you in a mild way, not just physically abusing you, there are various forms of bullying. The mildest form of bullying then you report, so that you have someone to talk to. You don't wait until it gets to the level that we are discussing. And then finally, I think that our laws are too focused on repressing or punishing the offender. In this case, you'll be dealing with two people, one who is offending and the other who has been bruised. So can our laws look more on how to restitute people who have suffered some form of bullying, so that we have more support systems in our schools to provide psychological support, and even material support and all that, so that children, when they go through bullying in any form, both at the basic and secondary school, are not encouraged to drop out of school or become timid for life or lose interest in education. But then they have the psychosocial support, to bounce back and become active participants in the education process.
Okay. Before I come to Kwesi, let me come to Raphael again. Raphael, I know you've been going to schools after this incident to try and talk to the students. What message are you sending to the students, and what response are you getting?
Well, the message is clear, that indeed students ought to conduct themselves within the framework of the code of conduct. The point is this. At times there's that misconception that when I wear the uniform, I am above laws and regulations and rules. And so we are trying to drum home that particular point. We feel that this particular incident presents to us an opportunity to drum home a message. See, now students have opportunity to be in school, courtesy the free SHS. And so that level of responsibility at times is lost on them. They feel, well, I'm eating free, wearing things free, getting everything free. And so that the onus of responsibility of ensuring that I conduct myself very well because there's an investment in me and I must show returns for that investment is lost on them. It is important that we continue to drum, and that is what I have been doing, going around the schools. Now, when you speak to students, you get the impression that it's not really a general problem. There are cases where students ought to perhaps take responsibility, report their colleagues who are misbehaving for action to be taken on them. And perhaps they feel, well, let's shield him, let's cover him. If I report him, I will be considered the bad one out. And so they begin to, and when these things fester, then it blossoms into a full or a big issue. And so we are calling on students as well to see, if you know a colleague, if you know somebody who is not misconducting himself, whose actions and inactions may bring repercussion to himself and perhaps even to the entire population of the school, it's important you point it out. Let the disciplinary tools deal with that individual for the sake of reformation. And we believe that we believe that message would catch up if all stakeholders are there. Again, we believe that other stakeholders must also come on board. Parents have a role to play, the society have a role to play, teacher unions have a role to play, CHAS has a role to play, GES has a role to play, policymakers also have a role to play. A concerted effort will give results.
Thank you, Raphael. Now, Mr. PRO, the minister has made a couple of comments. This was his initial reaction. What is the ministry's definite resolution? Because obviously the Konongo incident has shocked the nation. What would you promise that the ministry would do to deal with bullying in secondary schools once and for all?
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, we are still going to strengthen the existing policy. Of course, like I admitted clearly that there has been that gap, of course, when it comes to a level of understanding of the policy, especially on the part of the teachers, where they feel that we've taken their authority to the students. And so that engagement is going to go on from the side of the agency responsible for the pre-tertiary institutions, that is the Canada Education. Again, recently you heard the Minister of Education, Dr. Efodi, saying that we are going to introduce the Dean of Disciplines in our various institutions. And of course, I mean, the Deans of Disciplines are going to work with what Kofi said, the PTA. They are also going to work with the teachers. I mean, if you look at the Deans of Discipline concept that has been tried in other countries, Deans of Disciplines are people who have been trained on how to handle discipline issues. But of course, the whole idea is about reforming the student. And these are people who in most cases, you have their own colleague teachers have to nominate or elect them, of course, based on, I mean, sometimes certain criteria, which includes proving integrity, sometimes their fairness, their candidness, and their ability to understand and relate to the students, and of course reform them. And so that is also going to be introduced as soon as possible. so that in every institution you have the dean of disciplines who is wholly responsible for making sure that all disciplinary issues are really handled. And that means that as a ministry or the minister is this time around, again, giving much priority when it comes to discipline issues in our various schools. So, I mean, it is something that we are going to also do in addition to the already existing, the positive, how do you call it, discipline codes that we have. That at the end of the day, we believe that we are going to also strengthen by engaging more stakeholders and educating teachers and students on it.
Thank you very much for your time. Kofi, I'll end with you. I know you've been doing a lot of things. What's your current work? It's on exam leakage, right?
Yeah.
What have you found, just in a minute and a half?
Well, we just launched our WASI 2021 report, as we did last year. And we found out that out of 20 papers we monitored, 11 leaked.
Wow.
Questions are being sold between 100 and 150 Ghana cedis. And they are being sold on Telegram platforms with about 200,000 subscribers. And we have a situation where we are seeing institutionalized cheating in our schools, where it is no more one person going to buy questions or smuggling foreign materials, but then we're having the whole entire school participating in an organized activity in support of their children. And
have you provided the evidence to WAEC?
We met with WAEC, we met with Parliament, we met WAEC and Parliament together, and the GES leadership and then the Ministry of Education, the Deputy Minister was there and presented the evidence. We have all the evidence on our Telegram platform. So immediately we buy the questions, we put them on our Telegram platform. So if you go on our Telegram platform now, you will see the various times and dates that the questions were actually held. So we are engaging the Ministry of Education. We are confident that the ministry will accept a proposal for an independent regulator to be brought into Ghana, to be established to regulate the assessment sector and regulate WAEC, because at now WAEC set their own standards, determine compliance, and they are never at fault. And then also we are advocating for an external investigation into the leakage of this year's WASI, because WAEC cannot keep investigating itself.
It will not lead to what you expect.
Exactly.
Thank you. Kofi Asare, Africa Education Watch Executive Director. Also, we had Kwesi Kwarteng, who is the PRO for the Ministry of Education, and Raphael Sarko there, who is the Ashanti Regional SRC Coordinator. Thank you for watching. Let's keep speaking out to deal with bullying in our secondary schools. My name is Ben Adable. Thank you for watching. Coming up next is the Business Dashboard.
The Point of View is brought to you by Kel Charcoal Toothpaste. Kel Charcoal, happy smile. Enterprise Life. Enterprise, your advantage. Bell Aqua Active. Bell Aqua Active. Stay true to originality.